It's fixed. For me, it's not working.
Reload the page and it will be fixed.
Did you need a JabberScribe?
Yes, we do.
I'll do that. Yeah,
Brian.
I'll do that.
So Brian Rosen will be JabberScribe. Good, thank you.
Yeah.
And does anybody want to volunteer to be a note taker? I see somebody typing Brian Rosen will be JabberScribe into the notes. So is that Brian or is that somebody else? If it's somebody else.
That's just me saying I'm going to be the JabberScribe.
Well, thank you.
Have a volunteer to take notes? Well, I can take some. Can't promise how good they'll be.
Notes. I have to put them into some weird tool. What is that weird tool again?
It's the CodeMD. The slides will show
You
you
have to put it in the tool. It's just something we're trying to get people to use. If you want to use any tool you want, if you're willing to take minutes, chairs won't object, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You know, I will take two. I will use Word, which I always use, and then send it to you by email, as I always do. So Stefan takes notes.
Okay, thank you.
No, I don't.
I believe we are now at our starting time, so we're possibly let people begin to come in, but I think we're probably ready to start. Let's see. Let's find. Welcome to Avtcore. Welcome to Virtual Bangkok. And let's see. Okay, yes, it's the here we are, the meeting tips. If you're in the Medico room, you can join the travel room again. No, I'm hearing feedback from somebody. Is that you, Bernard? I think. Let's see. Okay, test. Yes, good. So, if you're in the Medico room, you can. You should be seeing the chat. If you joined early and it's not working, reload the page. There was Medico was having a brief issue, which they have fixed. Other than that, yes, see the notes here. There we are. Yeah, here are the instructions on how to use Medico. If you've been in the room, if you've been in one of these meetings previously, you probably hopefully know this, but if not, here are some tips. Important to note when you're at the queue, when you come to the front of the queue and we call on you, you have to unmute yourself rather than us unmuting you. And if you want to send video, that's great, but you have to send audio also separately. Video is just images, does not include audio. They're two separate toggles. Note well, this is an IETF meeting, so the note well applies. These are our standards on intellectual property and code of conduct. Please be familiar with these. And if you want more questions, ask somebody offline or follow the links on the page. About this meeting, we have the agenda, we have the notes, and we have the Jabber room. Bernard and I are the chairs. We have Brian Rosen will be Jabber scribe. If you aren't able to or don't want to speak, you can type something into the chat and he can relay it for you. We fix it with Mike. And we have Stefan Wenger taking notes on his own, but if somebody else also wants to take notes on the CodeMD or also on their own, that's also always appreciated. And just please send them to us or let us know where they are after the fact. Now what do I do with the slides tab? How many tabs? Our agenda. One agenda batch we had is that Colin Perkins, who was supposed to be the first item, has to be in the I think CoinRG or some IERG group because he's the chair of that. So we're going to bump him later until he's able to come here. He's in the Jabber, so we'll be able to let him know when it's time, but he's not yet here in the Metaco. So hopefully he'll be able to join here. And so we'll move Gunnar first, and then we'll see if Colin has joined, and then if not, we'll go on to Justin and so forth. And just do we have, other than that, we have all our, let's see. I don't think we have all the participants yet, so we'll have to see if everybody is here, but we'll try to get to things as we can get to them. Like over, is it anything you want? Yes, Tim, did you have something to say?
Yes, just one thing. The number 7, the RTP payload. It says as author S. Lugan, but it will be me who present this part.
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry for my first name only. I did fill in this incorrectly when I registered my account. I already modified it, but I think I need to log out and log in again, and I'm not going to do that now. So sorry. For
okay, yeah, just let us know your,
yes.
Just type your full name into the chat or something, then we can know
okay.
you are.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And Stefan.
So for EVC, we didn't have a presentation on that, or the EVC payload. We didn't have a presentation for that, but we need guidance, as this is, I think, will be declared as a working group draft. We need guidance how to proceed with it regarding the SDP parameters. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, we should be able to probably. Well, I've got the next slide is working group items that are not on the agenda today, so we can talk about that briefly. And then, speaking of which, here are the draft statuses since the last meeting. We have published one RFC, which was the TSVCIS payload, so good work there. We've got 4 documents that are in Auth48 done, which basically means they're waiting on other documents in their cluster to finish Auth48, as I understand it. So we're done as far as we're concerned, unless something exciting blows up. But hopefully that should be published once those clusters clear. Other than that, we've got 2 things that are, I think, both of these are probably me falling down a little bit. One is VP9, we said last time was ready for working class call, and we didn't. So we'll try to do that now. I think, Bernard, you should probably be the one to take that since I'm an author on that. So we should probably do that after the meeting. And then frameworking, Mo made some changes after the last IETF and said there's some changes that substantial enough we thought that should be in the working class call, which I then completely failed to respond to, and I apologize. It's my fault.
Yeah. Actually, if we could mark action items for both those working group last calls in the notes, that would be helpful. Yeah. It'll help us follow up.
Yes. So the Tetra payload draft is expired, I think, beginning of this year. It's not clear to me that anybody is still interested in pursuing that. So we might want to drop that from the milestones, but probably we should ping the authors first. So if you could put something in the minutes that the chairs should follow up on that, and if not, remove the milestone unless anybody else thinks that they want to take it over or anything. And then finally we had a call for adoption on EVC, which seemed to be favorable. So I think the authors should resubmit that as a working group item, since there were some people saying yes and nobody saying no. So yeah, you can still resubmit that as a draft IETF Avtcore. And Stefan, if you said you have questions you want to ask the list, I think the thing to do would be to email the mailing list with your questions, and hopefully we can get some good feedback on that. So that's everything that's on the agenda. Everything else, all the other working group items are on the agenda as far as I know, unless I missed something when I was going over the data tracker.
Hey, Chair. Shay here. Did you say we should upload a working group draft for the EVC?
Yeah, for EVC, yeah, I'll upload a working group draft.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then finally, thank you to everybody.
Content from the current EVC individual draft, right?
Yeah. Start from the current individual draft as your baseline.
Yeah. So in that case, again, I want to request 1 minute regarding. Yeah. In that case, again, I want to request 1 minute after the VVC payload draft to quickly have some suggestions for additional work there.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, and finally, as I said, thanks to the Secretariat and I guess also Medico, everybody here, and the ADs for everything they've done to help make this possible. And now I guess let's get started. So I think we're going to start with Gunnar, yes? So let's see here. Okay, just let me know when you want me to advance the slides. Actually, I don't think, make sure you're sending audio, Gunnar, right? We only see your video, not your audio.
How about that? You hear me?
Yes, now we hear you. Yes.
Fine. Okay, so this is a presentation of the multi-party real-time text items. We have 2 drafts. One is still personal, but the important one is draft IETF Avtcore multi-party RTT mix, and just made version 10 yesterday. The other one is more background specification of the solutions, discussing of different solutions. It's called multi-party RTT solutions, and it's on level 04 right now. So please, next. I'll start this time with a show of possible presentations of real-time text in a multi-party setting. The idea is that we shall not prescribe presentation, but we have some background requirements from the ITUT presentation level standard T140. And it says that you shall present even if you have multiple parties sending simultaneously. You need to present it readable in at least phrases or sentences with the source indicated, and you should have multiple insertion points so that the text can flow from multiple parties at the same time. And the approximate timing of the entries shall be visible. So this is one way you can present real-time, multi-party real-time text with 3 participants. And next slide, please. And on next slide, there is another view in a kind of chat style where you have, oops, that was too rapid, but it looks like a traditional chat style, but the text is flowing in multiple insertion points so that you can follow more than one participant's entries in real time. And next slide, please. The solutions draft is just informational, and it's used as background for specification of the standards track draft. It contains the requirements and the different transport and negotiation solutions with pros and cons for different alternatives. It can be used by developers, and it can be used for inspiration in future work. The latest changes were to align it with version 09 of the Avtcore draft. But now it's has backlog again since I made version 10. I had an ambition from the beginning to make this an RFC, but I'm not sure anymore if we continue that. I think it's valuable as background at least. Next slide, please. So the important one is the RTT mix, which is now 10. It is a standard track draft. The main focus is on the RTP-based solution for a centrally controlled SIP conference with multiple parties. There is brief information on WebRTC, which is now an RFC to be 8865. There are also brief information of gateways and security. Good presentation of text requires that multi-party aware actions by the receiver. So the receiver must be able to handle this RTP flow and distribute the received text from multiple simultaneously sending sources so that it can be presented in a readable way, even if it comes simultaneously. So the presentation need to be in readable chunks like phrases or so. The draft contains 2 RTP mixing solutions. One is for multi-party aware endpoints with RFC 4103 format with 1 source per packet in the CSRC. So each packet must not have more than 1 source, and the source is indicated in CSRC. And the other one is a fallback for endpoints who do not understand this multi-party format. So there the mixer needs to make the mixing, and that is not at all as functional as the main solution, but it's needed because there are real-time text implementations out there who do not understand this new way of doing multi-party. So that's the main thing, main contents of this draft. And next slide, please. I got a series of good comments from Brian just beginning of November, and one important question was, why do we need to change between two sources in a slow and clumsy way? Why don't we, if we have more than one source in the mixer, why don't we just interleave them? And that made me rethink and introduce a much more efficient interleaving method. And that was included in the version I submitted yesterday. So that enables different sources for each packet instead of change at every fourth packet, which we had in earlier versions. So this makes it possible to have 4 or 5 simultaneous participants sending text at the same time without performance loss. And next slide, please. So the new way is that when there is text from more than one source available for transmission in the mixer, then send next packet with all available text from the source with the oldest remaining unsent text, and send this 100 milliseconds after the latest packet. I have this timing so that we don't overload anything in the path, the network, the receiver, or the mixer. And when text is available only from one source, which is usually during most of the time in a session, then send next packet 330 milliseconds after latest packet. But then this will synchronize with the packets coming from the sender, which is usually sent at the 300 milliseconds interval. So this will be aligned with a more efficient transmission of packets. And next slide, please. This new interleaving method requires a totally changed detection of loss and recovery of redundancy when needed. So the receiver now needs to look at the timestamp of the latest received text from each source, and when it receives anything more, it evaluates the original timestamp of redundant text and check if the text was received from that source with these timestamps, and recover the text if this redundant text was not received as original before. The marking of possible loss is more tricky now. It's harder to detect if there was a complete loss instead of possibility to recover from the redundancy. So this lost sentence is in fact wrong. You can have, if you have lost 3 packets anywhere the last second, then there might be a loss. And this is the bad side of the new method, that we cannot exactly detect if we lost anything. Next slide, please. So now here it says that the new version is planned, but it was submitted yesterday, so that you can all check the changes. And it is these, the new interleaving method that is big new thing. The other parts are not drastically changed. And I hope that we can now go for last call in this for this draft. And I think this was the end. Next slide, please. Yep, and comments are very welcome. We have not had very much comments on this draft, and it is needed to get it processed. Thanks.
Gunnar, there's a question in the chat room that says, how will this lose-3 mechanism work with new packet recovery mechanisms like RAC?
RAC. I haven't read about RAC, so can you tell me a little about RAC? Is that something on a lower packet level, or is it included in RTP?
It's coming from the Jabber room, so I don't.
Okay. Interesting note. I can check it offline.
You'll have to enable audio as well. Yeah.
I'm Daniel Havey. I asked the question. I actually joined the queue, but nobody called on me. So RAC is a new packet recovery mechanism. Instead of fast recovery and having 3 lost packets, what we do is we use time, and so we'll resend packets based on time. And I'm just wondering how this is going to interact with the mechanism of looking at 3 lost packets. So fair warning, I'm new here.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd bring it up and ask the question.
Yeah. Since RAC is new to me, I cannot see exactly how it will interfere with this.
Remember that RTT doesn't have a continuous packet sequence, right? It's intermittent. It's how fast you type. So you can't use time as an indication of missed data. It might not work at all.
Well, yeah, but we collect text in small chunks, which is irregular. You can, but in order to not overload the path, we say that we don't send more than now 100 millisecond chunks of text.
Okay, so I see.
And
so
sometimes 300, and then if you stop typing, then it will not send anything until next time you type.
So then are you telling me that you're collecting like chunks of data, like 3 chunks of data are missing, and you say, oh, okay, that must be packet loss?
We have the sequence number in RTP to detect packet loss. But now we change so that when we have received, we have a redundancy scheme to be able to recover from packet loss, and now we first look at the timing of the timestamp of the RTP packets and look back if we have received the redundant part before, comparing its original timestamp and timestamp in the redundancy header.
Okay, I think actually this probably doesn't affect you because RAC is not prominent in UDP protocols. It's prominent in TCP.
Yeah.
You know, we introduced it in Windows.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it probably maybe something you should think about for the future, because it seems to be a much better mechanism than the fast recovery with 3 packets. But I don't think it actually affects this protocol now.
No, right. We are using RTP and the redundancy of RFC 2198, which transmits every chunk 3 times. So you're right, and it is UDP and it is RTP, and this draft is just a small addition to the original real-time text transmission RFC 4103. So we didn't want to change any major transport mechanism. That is, we have already an RFC for WebRTC transport, where you use the data channel of WebRTC. I think that will be the future way to transport real-time text, in fact. But
Okay,
the RTP is still needed, so thanks.
My question is answered. Thank you.
Okay. Brian?
Yeah. So I will check 10 to see how you've resolved the other of my comments and look at this new mechanism for see if I think the text is okay. I do think the doc at that point should be ready for working group last call, and I want to remind participants that this is high priority work. There is implementations that are waiting for this to solidify so that they can do it. There are planned deployments in Canada related to emergency calls. We really don't want to have multi-party unaware endpoints if we can deal with it. But at any rate, this is very high priority work for some people, and will get deployed very quickly. So please, let's finish. Thank you.
Thanks.
I guess as an individual, I had one question. With this loss, you can always tell you've lost something. You can't necessarily always tell which participant's text was lost. Is that correct?
No, the problem now is that it's harder to detect what loss there was.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I think.
And of course, in theory, it's always hard to detect which packets you never got.
Right. Yeah. So I think let's try to get that to working group last call if you think all open issues are resolved. So whoever's taking notes, please take also a note there that we'll send that to working group last call shortly. So I think on the other document, my suggestion would be if we do want to publish that as information, let's try to get the main RTT text document done first, and then if we want to publish the other document as informational afterwards, because that's obviously much less time critical. Doesn't
I'm not sure we're publishing that, right? Were you planning to publish it, Gunnar?
I originally said no, and then I thought other people said yes, so I said okay, that's fine. But if other people are saying no now, I'm happy to say no on that too. So I'm happy to do with whatever the group wants. But last time people said they thought it might be useful.
There, I don't know.
Is there a
useful
follow-up
words.
action for the chairs to do a working group last call? Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're ready to do working group last call on the main document. That's the.
Give me an opportunity to review 10 to make sure that my comments were resolved.
Okay, yeah, let us. Yeah, so email the list when you've done that, Brian, and then we'll do if you're happy, we'll do a working group last call.
Yeah, I'll be on the list shortly. I will review 10 shortly and send any comments I have.
Sounds
great.
Thanks.
Great. All right, and then we'll figure out what to do with the other document, if anything, later.
Yeah, we can wait with that question.
Yep. All right. So I think, is that everything for this? I think so. So let's move on.
Justin is up next, I think.
Yeah, Justin's next. We still don't have Colin, so let's see. Let me share Justin's slides. There we are. You can just unmute yourself, Justin. You don't have to be on the queue. Perfect.
There we go. I don't remember how this thing works. Okay, so this is a continuation of the topic that we sort of discussed at 108 and sort of managed to make a lot of good progress there. It's not modified the presentation and the reference document. So next slide. The overall problem statement is that basically SRTP only encrypts the actual payload of RTP packets, and historically that was not really a big deal. Most of the information that was covered in header extensions was generally considered to be non-sensitive. Next slide. But now we are actually sending a fair amount of stuff in header extensions. And some of these have even been noted in their defining RFCs as something where they're carrying information that's somewhat sensitive, in particular SSRC audio level, which actually carries like the volume of not just who is speaking, but the exact sort of, or a quantized energy level. And video content type also kind of indicates whether someone is sending video or a screen share, which can be used to indicate, well, who is speaking in a meeting and maybe who is presenting. So there's definitely some information that you could then mine out of this header information. And even if you're not recovering all the actual details of what's being discussed, you can still learn things about the clients. Do they have hardware codecs? Do they support HDR? What type of application is it? Where of course our trend is to try to move away from letting any of this information be carried in clear text. RFC 6904 did try to address this, but only sort of encrypting the actual payloads of these extensions rather than the extensions and their IDs themselves. So even if you were to encrypt the bodies, you'd still be able to tell what extensions were being sent around by virtue of the IDs. Because most of the SDPs that exist right now in WebRTC implementations are fairly static, and so you can probably figure out what's being sent around just by looking at these numeric IDs. So next slide. What we're going to do is encrypt the entire extension block, including the IDs and their lengths. And while we're doing that, we'll also encrypt some of the other things that are kind of easy to encrypt in the SRTP packet, most notably the CSRC identifiers. And we discussed this at IETF 108 as whether there were more things that could be encrypted, but it turns out that the timestamp and the sequence number and the SSRC are used for the key schedule for encryption. And then there's some other things needed for demuxing, like the payload type and some of the other bits that we decided that it was more trouble than it would be worth to actually try to go and encrypt those pieces. And if you really wanted to do something and basically secure all that information, you'd be better off with an encapsulating protocol like DTLS. So overall, this seems like a pretty simple thing we can do. We can use the existing SRTP encryption mechanism to basically the offset of where you start encrypting, rather than starting at the payload. We just started earlier and cover the CSRC and extension block. And we don't change any of the actual where the lengths are in the packet, so it's compatible with all existing RTP parsing code, which is nice. Next slide. So here, this kind of defines, you need to know whether or not your counterparty is actually using this technique. And the way this is done is by each, RFC 5285 defines a mechanism for identifying that 5285 is in use, which is the thing that we use to figure out how to encode the header extensions. And they put they call it defined by profile block in there, which is a 16-bit integer of a certain form that tells us that the things are laid out in a certain way. Here we've basically introduced a new 16-bit integer, which basically says that we're doing 5285 header extensions, but this time they're all fully encrypted. If you want to get into the details, there's actually two things defined in 5285. One for where the ID and the length are contained in a single byte. And then there's another one where if the ID and length are each individual bytes, as known as like 2-byte headers for the extensions. And here we have 2 new 16-bit defined by profile identifiers for the 1-byte and 2-byte ID and length combos. Martin, did you have a question, or I see you're showing up as green on my screen?
Sorry, it's the only way I get audio. Need a couple.
Oh, no worries. All right, next slide. So that's the basic mechanism. There are some special cases. One of them is that if you want to send a packet that doesn't have header extensions, but does have CSRCs that you want to encrypt, the only way that you can tell their counterparty that the header extensions are actually being encrypted is by adding the 32 bits basically for an empty extension block, where you'd have the 16 bits for the defined by profile thing saying that the extensions are encrypted, and then their other 16 bits can basically say it's just a 0-length extension block. And that was pointed out by Sergio, and I think that's a pretty clean solution to that particular problem. May not actually be a real world case most of the time. Extensions are almost always being sent, but at least covers that little loose end. The actual capability is signaled via SDP. In the draft, it talks about a new thing called XMAP encrypted. Jonathan pointed out that XMAP, that sort of string has its own connotation about the extension map between the actual extension string and IDs. And since we're not really encrypting like the map, so to speak, maybe we ought to have a different, attribute that indicates this particular mechanism. So we haven't really come up with the exact, string. Naming is hard, but for want of a better attribute, I'm now suggesting A equals cryptx. And then finally, the way this would actually be configured by the application, we have some precedent here with WebRTC and how it would set things like the bundle policy. Here you'd have a policy that could be set for cryptx, and you either say negotiate, in which you'd offer cryptx but still be okay if you didn't get it from the other side, or require, where you'd offer cryptx and fail if the remote description did not include the cryptx SDP attribute. Next slide. So overall, though, not a lot of open issues. Implementations are progressing. Sergio is working on getting this into libsrtp, so we should be able to actually implement it and test it out pretty soon. I know Jonathan's also been helping with Sergio and getting actual test vectors, so we can make sure that everything is producing the encryption output that we expect. And I'm hoping that we can have a working implementation in the next couple of months.
I've implemented in the Bitsy SRTP library, and Sergio and I are getting, agree on the test vector, so that's a good sign.
Good, good.
So what is there an action item here, such as
well,
option, or?
we want to adopt the workflow item.
Yeah, that would be that's I was going to say next.
I mean, yeah, and I think I guess. Yeah, so does anybody have any opinions? I mean, I would think it sounds like, my first attempt at encrypting header extensions was an overcomplicated failure, so I'm happy to do something that's easy, and I implemented this in a day, so it's definitely easy. So does anybody else have any opinions on whether this is a good idea and just whether we should adopt it? And I also saw some comments on the Jabber room, so if you wanted to raise those also, that I saw Mo had a comment there, and Harold.
So Harold asked, can we lose 1-byte header extensions while we're at it? This is the kind of thing where we're actually at like 16 header extensions, I think, in WebRTC right now. So I can understand why Harold might be proposing that. The 1 byte is actually a nice optimization. You're basically saving 1 byte for each header extension. which, while not a lot, I always think of like codec engineers go to quite some lengths to save even like 1 byte. So I don't really see any real value at trying to, remove it at this point in time. It would also sort of, I think, the separation of concerns here is that we're not really changing 5285 any other way than just kind of encrypting. I think he keeps things nice and simple. Mo asks, go ahead.
The reason why I ask is because we've seen a number of people saying, "Oh, I get to this 1 byte, 2 byte cliff, and I'm afraid of what will happen if I cross it." So I'd like to not have people turn off extensions at random just to get under 14.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I think we ought to audit some of the extensions that we have and get rid of some of the cruft.
Yeah,
probably maybe eventually in long term, maybe that's being overly optimistic, but.
Okay, I'll raise the issue. Well,
yeah,
it's okay to leave it the way it is.
Okay, well, thanks for the. It's a good point, though. We can discuss it more on the list. Mo asks, "Will encrypted CSRC?"
Well, Mo's actually in the queue, so he can probably ask.
Okay.
So, but I think Bernard is ahead of him in the queue. I assume
I'm on the
queuing
chat
as an individual.
Yeah. Just wanted to say, just from my personal opinion, I think we should call for adoption. I think it's ready.
Okay. Mo?
Yeah, so just to clarify, that this is expecting all middle boxes, everything that's the RTP flowing through to be aware of this, right? It's not intended to be transparent to some things. It's intended to, everything that's on the path that's looking at the RTP should know about this, right?
Well, it depends on like everything. If there's like, sort of packet, capture tools, like they can continue to work on this. If they're trying to just look at, basically what packets and what lengths are being set. But if you're trying to understand the packet, then yes, you would need to be able to decrypt this. And like SFU or something would certainly be expected to be decrypting this and processing it in clear text.
Okay, so if SFUs are expected to be processing this, then I think the CSRC concerns aren't that big of a deal, because it would have to take someone that's actually participating in the RTP session to get confused by those scrambled CSRCs. So I think that's probably not a big deal.
I think the way you look at this is like this is basically an upgrade to DTLS SRTP. That this is a point-to-point encryption system, and so like for talking to the SFU, it would basically need to it would implement the actual decryption thing for SRTP for getting at the payload as well as getting at the actual encrypted CSRCs and header extensions.
Okay, so if you were to do S-frame or anything like that, or any other kind of perk or any other kind of end-to-end crypto, then this wouldn't be part of the end-to-end context.
Correct. It would be on the hop-by-hop context.
Got it. All right. Thanks.
Colin?
Can people hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I was just going to comment back towards Harold's comment about 1 byte or something, which I see the value of. I get it, but I don't think it really has anything to do with this draft. I think that's a very separable thing, and we should do that separately if we want to do a 1 byte thing. And of course, it could work with this mechanism too. So I'd rather not try and put it in this draft. I think we should do that separately. And this draft just tries to clean up a difficult part of our encryption that no one really ever implemented, and it just makes it harder to deal with the hop by hop encryption of some stuff that's really hard to do with our existing RFCs. So that's it.
Okay, so it sounds like people are in favor of adopting this. So we'll put out a call on the list for any other opinions. So note takers, make sure we have that noted down that we're going to do that. But it sounds like, at least from people who are here, people are in favor. Okay, and I think we now have Colin, so we can go to RTP congestion control feedback. I assume you're ready, Colin?
Yeah, I'm here. That was massively lucky timing that I just happened to drop in as the thing was finishing there.
Let's see where.
Sorry for being late. I had to pay attention.
It's okay.
For a while.
Let's see which tab is this. This one. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, hi, I'm Colin Perkins. I just want to talk briefly about the RTP congestion control feedback draft, which I'm hoping we're very, very nearly done on. Next slide, please. Okay, so the 08 version of this draft went to IESG review a little while ago. It got a bunch of comments from the TSV review team, from the GenArt. Ayana had a couple of clarifications, and there are a bunch of AD review comments. Most of these were editorial nits, and I'll just briefly go through those to summarize them. But there are also a small number of technical changes to review, which is why I'm presenting it in this meeting. Next slide. Okay, so starting with the editorial stuff, I hope absolutely none of this is at all controversial. We added some clarifications to the abstract to explain what the scope was and why we needed this. We removed some references to the terminology defined in some RFCs, which didn't define any terminology. We clarified that since RTCP packets don't contain a sequence number, you have to infer based on the time since you last got an RTCP packet as to whether there's any feedback packets been lost. We made a clarification that if multiple feedback packets are lost, it's the media sender that should reduce its transmitting rate rather than the RTCP that should reduce its transmission rate. And since the REMB draft had expired many years ago, we put a reference to the generic concepts rather than to that draft. Next slide. Okay, there are also, I hope this is more readable for everyone else than it is for me. There are also some technical changes in the draft. This one I think is sort of borderline between technical and editorial. In that there was a field which was a label called the L field, which indicates whether the packets were received, and we just flipped the name of the field around, so it's now the R field, which indicates whether the packets were received to avoid confusing everybody. And we clarified that if a packet is lost, then the bits in the field indicating its arrival time offset and its ECN mark must be are set to 0 and must be ignored. And the must be ignored is a new normative requirement. Next slide. We also, I think this was in response to Magnus, that there are, and I think this is the main change, the previous version of the draft said that when you were negotiating this, you either put in the SDP attribute to indicate this format, or the SDP attribute to indicate the RFC 6679 ECN feedback format, but you didn't put in both. So if you put this one in, it said you must not put the other format in. What the new version says is that you can put both of them in, and the receiver picks which one it wants, and you know, in the answer chooses which of the two formats it wishes to use for ECN. So essentially that enables the negotiation there, and that's a change to the way the signaling works. And the other addition was that the second paragraph here, we add some suggestions saying follow all the guidelines in section 7 of RFC 6679, which is the ECN for RTP draft, And these are the guidelines that talk about how you probe to make sure the ECN is still working and that sort of thing. And the next slide. Okay, and the final thing we did was just clarify the security considerations, mostly pointing out that authentication can solve some of the denial of service attacks. And I think that's everything. Is there another slide? Yes. So yeah. So the questions are the working group okay with these changes? And if the answer is yes, then I think the ISG click the approve button, and this goes to the RFC editor. And if not, well, we'll need to do an update and a new review cycle. So that's all I have. Thank you.
I see Magnus in the queue.
Yes. So about the ECN thing, I think the most important recommendation, which was kind of missing there for you around ECN, was to send, if you get CE marks, send those immediately aspect of it. That was what I picked up, because that recommendation is quite important for the performance and reactions to ECN CE marks. That's maybe the most important takeaway from that recommendation, rather than anything else. So
do you think the text that Colin has is clear enough, or does that need to be?
Yes. I mean, in general, it was more about what he said in his presentation. So if you actually go follow and read those guidelines, that will be apparent. So, and I have cleared my disgust of this, so I thought it was clear enough. It's just that you need to follow and read the section to realize that that didn't came through in his presentation.
Okay. I mean, if you think it's useful, we can add a sentence to that explicit. Send me text, and I'll spin a new revision very quickly if that's
good. No, I don't know. I mean, I do expect people to actually be able to follow references for the guidance and actually look through them, because then if they do, I think it's fine. It's just that in this context of the presentation in this session, it wasn't clear that that's what maybe the aspect which made you realize this. So.
Sure.
All right. So, I mean, it sounds like the working group is okay with these changes. We probably should. Have we mentioned this on the mailing list or not? I don't.
I did send a pointer when the draft was announced, but I'm not sure that people necessarily read it carefully.
Well, I mean, I would. I mean, it sounds like. I mean, as an individual, I think all these are fine. And I think if anybody has, I'd say if anybody here has any issues with this, call us out now. Otherwise, personally, I think that I would say the working group is probably fine with this, because, it's a discussion between you and Magnus anyway, and that's the people we'd go to see whether the working group agrees with this. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main technical change here is the signaling. So if people are okay with that,
yeah, I mean, I guess that's basically just just changing how the offer answer works. That you would send the offer may send both, and the answer will respond to one or the other. Yeah. I have no problem with that person. Yeah. That's how most things work in offer answers. All right. I think, since we're not getting any complaints here, and we didn't get any complaints on the list, I would say the working group is okay with these changes. If anybody disagrees, let me know. But otherwise, I'd say ADs. Barry?
Okay. Yeah, I'm good with that. Is there a reason not to just post a link to the diffs on the mailing list and give?
Yeah, I guess let's just do an explicit call on the.
Yeah. Just say these are
I did post a link to the diffs on the list already.
My evaluation.
Okay, well, I think he did previously, so I think nobody responded to it. So I think in that case, that's why I'm saying it's probably fine.
Perfect. Then I will go ahead and give it a final look and approve it.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And what was next on the agenda?
think Sergio.
So yeah, S frame. All right. Here, this one, right? Sergio, that is your slides, right?
Hi, hello.
Yes.
Good, good.
Yep. Okay, yes. So this is these slides are meant to be an introductory of the topic, and most of you most probably have already followed the discussion that we are having in the S-frame working group. But I mean, just to make it properly, yes, what I'm going to do is just to make a quick introduction about what is S-frame and what problems that we have with the RTP encapsulation of the encrypted payload. So we are all aware of it, and we can trigger the discussion in this working group properly. So next slide, please. So as you know, I'm going to talk especially about WebRTC. This it has a peer-to-peer encryption model, means that all the content between both ends of the DLT, the TLS connection is encrypted. But if you are using a media server, the media server will have to actually decrypt the content that are sent between in SRTP in order to perform the forward between the peers. So in this case, all the data that is coming in the that it is inside the media server is unencrypted, and it is obviously first the SVU has access to it, so it is something that in many cases it is something that it is not required, and it is also subject to attacks that may happen in the media server itself. So next slide. The idea of S-frame and is to be able to do an end-to-end encryption that will just include inner encryption on top of the hop-by-hop encryption. So when these contents go through the media server or any intermediary server in the path, they are still encrypted, so they cannot be accessed by any intermediate peer. The also just saying again, this is just a quick introduction about the frame. Just if anyone it has not been following the S-frame working group, the main idea and the difference with other approaches, as for example PERC, is that they have a different approach about the key management system. The goal also is to minimize the overhead when adding the end-to-end encryption inner layer, and also we trying to be independent of the underlying transport, so it can be all applied to RTP, but also it works with other transport, like for example QUIC. And when used without RTP, we are required that no special handle for RTX or FEC is required, in order to minimize the changes that it is required to implement it in both SVUs and endpoints. Also, obviously, one requirement is that it must work with most popular audio and video codecs that we already are using in the video conference scenarios. So, next slide, please. One of the main differences with this frame is that it does not work on upper packet, but is doing a full frame encryption. So it happens in a different stage of what, for example, PERC is doing the encryption. It is happening actually before or between the encoder and the RTP layer. So it encrypts the frame as it gets out of the encryptor, of the encoder, and before the RTP packetization is happening, and also in the receiver is happening after the packetization, but before passing it to the decoder. So this causes problems with the RTP packetization, and it requires some new mechanisms that, or at least to check how these interact with the current RTP payloads of the especially the video codecs, because the audio codecs has, at least at the end, you have one packet per frame, so it is not so critical as in video. And in in web browser, the W3C spec is we have it is available by the insertable streams API that allows the JavaScript to modify the contents just in this stage before the frame that it is produced by the encoder before the RTP packetization. So it can be used by end-to-end encryption, but also can be used to modify the frame in any way, and more use cases are happening already. For example, to be able to add ad hoc media frame, ad hoc metadata defined by the application to the media frame. I did a quick demo of how to, for example, introduce the face detection data into the media frame, so it is transported alongside with the video frames from end to end. So this obviously is what it is coming into the RTP packetization is not a media frame anymore. It is something different, and it must be, or it interacts with how the RTP packetization is done. So next slide, please.
Okay. We have Magnus in the queue. Magnus?
Yep.
Yeah, clarification question here around one aspect. I think isn't your too coarse-grained here when you talk about video frame. I mean, this is the S-frame encrypted encapsulation is going to be on the codec's smallest independently usable unit, whatever that's called. And I mean, I think we need to be clear about that before, when you have scalability, etc. Its relation to RTP and RTP streams, etc., is dependent on if you have one or multiple scalability layers in one RTP stream, etc. So I think we need to be very careful here in terminology and clarify these aspects so that the payload format, etc., is actually recommending you do the right thing, and so.
Yeah, but for example, the spatial scalability and the independent decodable units, or how it can be slices in x64 or tiles in AB1 is not specific to RTP. So, but
no, they're not. But it's to design a payload format that works as possible good for generic use for as many codecs as possible. I think it's very important that working with this payload format, you establish the terminology, clearly maps out that you can have these different cases, so that we ensure that we get a payload format that actually is useful and flexible enough to cover the different use cases depending on the codec and the encoding implementation of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just not just propose anything. I just making a description about what is the current state of the and the problem statement. So it's
yeah, but
I agree with you. Yes,
by not describing that level, you're not making the problem correctly represented, and therefore will design a wrong payload format for it. That's my point.
Yeah, but I have not yet get to that slide yet. So.
Okay. Yeah, we'll shut up for now. But
Justin. Justin, if you want to talk, you should have. Oh, yeah, there you go.
In S-frame, and this is definitely something we thought about. In fact, that the implementation of S-frame that exists right now, has to deal with this of multi-layers, multiple encodings right now already. And we talked about this notion of an IDU, independent decodable unit, which could be you separate individual sort of spatial layers, but then also deal with individual tiles or slices within a particular layer. So anyway, I think Sergio's going to get to this, but it is something that has been thought about from the beginning.
Yeah, so these were kind of the conclusions that, or the ideas that we gathered yesterday when presenting a much more detailed information about how the video code, the current payloads interact with this frame. This is in the slides for that were presented 2 days ago in S-Frame, so you want more details about the specific interaction between the codecs and S-Frame is there. But the conclusion is that not all video codec supports S-Frame easily. I mean, it's video codecs or RTP packetization of the video codes requires a different processing in order to be able to adapt to query encrypted payload. And this obviously causes problems both in a specification and because you have to start checking in to a very detailed way how this has to be made for each codec and checking the security properties of each of the transformation, because in some cases you have to send unencrypted parts of the video frame in order to SVU for working, and also will create problems in the interoperability because you will have the interoperability matrix will be increased as the number of codecs increases. Also, this was seen that for SVU to work, it is something that it requires some metadata for the frame that must be guarded and encrypted. So it seems that it is better to have it into a header extension that inside the RTP payload. That's, for example, BP8 or BP9 is doing it right now. And if possible, it would be good to have some kind of solution that could be reused for other protocols that are not RTP based, as S-Frame is also agnostic of the transport. So and according to the chapter that it is, I have just make a small grease up. S-Frame is not going to work in the packetization, or is not meant to create any kind of packetization, but it will just relay the word to the proper work groups that it is Avtcore for discussing this if it is needed a new packetization format, and if we need any header extension for this metadata, and music for if there is any kind of signaling to be done in the SDP. So this is the main idea of this slide, is to introducing the topic here so we can decide what needs to be done in the proper group. So next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, just again, this is just to trigger the discussion. 3 main items I think that it should be done. That it is one is to define a new video packetization format that it is codec agnostic and allows to transport a raw binary blob. It can be encrypted or it can be and the output of the insertable media frames that can be whatever the application decides to happen. As I think it was Magnus said that we'll have to decide if we need to support partial decodability and how do we support it. And the other topic is how to, if we need to define a new header extension to carry the metadata that it is required for SVU operation and do specifically the layer switching where you are using spatial or temporal scalability. We have different options here, just to name a few. Just I don't want to point to say what is my favorite or what I don't want to propose any solution, just to list what the space we will reuse is. One is the frame marking that it is already defined, been designed here, and also it is possible, it is also available the AV1 dependency descriptor that it is been working on in our media. It's also meant to be codec agnostic, so we can also reuse it or check how it implements things for this operation metadata required by the SVUs. And also we need to check about how the SDP negotiation is going to be, and check if we are going to link the negotiation. Well, this most probably happen in music, but I don't know so exactly the overlap between the both groups when doing the packetization. So we will have to check if how we are going to link this new packetization format to the current negotiation of the standard one. So I mean, if you are going to have, for example, H264 in with the normal RTP packetization and this new video packetization that it is codec agnostic. You have to negotiate both or they are independent, and also in here I think that it could be very interesting to check the payload format restriction for negotiating restriction of the video codec formats in a codec agnostic way. That it is something that has already been working on, and it is available in a draft. So this is again, this is just to trigger the discussion and see what should be done, and if we want to do it, or what is the feeling of the people.
So in terms of action item, Sergio, do you have an action item to prepare a draft on the generic RTP packetization for S-frame?
I don't think I have it, but I can prepare it. I have already been working on it, so I will happy to do the work.
Yeah, we're happy to have you bring a draft, and then the working group consider whether they want to adopt it. I mean, presumably, since S-frame is a IETF working group, the inclination would be to say yes. So obviously, we'll have to. The details matter. The other process comment I make is in terms of the SDP negotiation. If it's just negotiation of the properties of this meta payload type, that's generally a thing that can be done in a payload format draft. If it's something that's more complicated, then yeah, we would need to be music. And Colin?
Yeah, hi. So one of the things about the way RTP has been designed right from the very beginning was that it was explicitly and intentionally designed not to be codec agnostic. You know, the reason we have particular payload formats was that the group believed that there was value in that in terms of increasing robustness and allowing partial decodability and so on. And over the many years that this working group has existed, it has declined to standardize codec agnostic payload formats on a number of occasions. Now, maybe the constraints have changed. I mean, the type of applications people are building nowadays are perhaps different to the ones they were building 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, whatever it was. But if we're going to change that sort of fundamental underlying assumption of how we do the processing, we should do it deliberately rather than just sleepwalking into it.
Okay, Mo, you're up next.
We can't hear you, Mo. Are you muted?
I couldn't hear when you gave me the floor because the peer connection thing. When you hit unmute too fast, you lose the indication that you actually have the floor. I think there may be a little bit of tension between what Justin was presenting and S-frame, because if the premise of end-to-end is that we don't want to, we think that the middle boxes could be adversaries, and in that sense, if you want to encrypt as much as possible from your adversaries, then I wonder if the things that that we're thinking need to be done, even for the RTP headers and CSRCs and whatnot, if they're not being done for S-frame, assuming anyone ever does S-frame over RTP instead of over some other transport. So I don't think that impacts Sergio's problem here too much, but it just makes me wonder about the overall threat models that we're trying to do for end-to-end versus just encrypt wherever possible.
Magnus?
Yes. So, I mean, it's partly response to Colin's here about RTP, and I think I agree with the deliberate thing, and that's why I think it's very important that we do describe this very well about, and that's why I think it's so important to say, okay, we are actually boiling down this problem to saying that for a codec that's going to be encoded in or packetized into RTP, you still need to say structure it into what you consider the smallest independent decodable units, and let RTP handle that. And I think we're getting down to that level where RTP's ALF principle was intended to be, but we're generalizing that just slightly. I think you're still, for a codec, actually going to need a bit of a description in the future, even if you're never intending to send it other than over S frames over RTP, you would still need to sit down and actually define, okay, what do I actually put what do I consider as independent decodable units? How does that relate to some degree with the timings, etc. of these things, decoding order, and things like that, that actually is relevant, because there are aspects of this which actually needs quite careful design, and that's why I think it's very important to start staying on the high level in this preparation for this document, is to really say, okay, what do we have? How do we deal with decoding order? How do we deal with time? How do we deal with different scalability layers? And actually go through that so that we know what metadata I need. We know what's from robustness layer principles, etc. It needs to happen so that you can do repairs in a reasonable way on IDUs and things like that. So, thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, we will have to do the new packetization form, and it will have to be done thoroughly. I mean, I don't want to prevent any kind of discussions. I mean, but for example, regarding the partial decodability, while it is something that there has been a lot of effort to define it, I have not seen much use of it in the real life, so I would love to get more information about it. For example, in AV1, even if it is supported in the codec for tiles, the RTP packetization format and the descriptor does not allows the SVU to handle it. So even if it is supported in the codec, it is not actually being used at all. And I would love to get more information about how it is actually being used, because in my years of experience, I have not worked with a system that has supported it. So even if I implemented it, I have never seen it in action. But I agree that it is something important that we need to take care and define specifically what are the smallest units and how these interact with each video codec.
Yeah, I mean, this is pushing as it's authentic encryption, there's frames. I mean, you are going to end up in a situation where you either get the whole ID or not, and I think that's actually helps to clarify this question to a lot, is that we're not going to see at least partial. If you get the first n bytes of the slice, you could decode it, attempt decoding of it, but in this case, you're not going to be able to decrypt it and verify it. So therefore, you have to throw it away, and I think it's just accept that fact and deal with that, and put that to say, okay, this is an aspect of why you need to think through what your IDUs are.
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment to Mo's point about how this stacks up with cryptex. I hadn't really thought about it too much. Sort of figuring that most of the data that's sent in header extensions is actually something that SFU usually wants to peek at. Audio level being one obvious example, and also the transport control feedback message that Colin just talked about being some of the data that goes on that, and perhaps being another. We might want to audit that and see if there are things that we wouldn't want an SFU to look at. My guess is though that stuff is probably for the overall threat model probably much less of a concern than the actual media, which in most implementations right now is currently being exposed. So I wouldn't want to get too caught up in those details, but it's probably worth looking at a little bit as part of the cryptex effort.
Yeah, also I think that this is one of the use cases of the insertable media stream, because it allows you to put metadata in the actual payload that it is encrypted end to end. So even if it is not it started kind of hacky way of adding information to the video frame, I think that it will help just to be able to not send information or metadata that it is encrypted by or available in clear text in the SVU, but that it will be transmitted end to end encrypted from inside the actual payload of S-frame.
Stefan? Stefan, I'm not hearing you.
Yeah, you're muted, Stefan.
This user interface just sucks. So traditionally, the mapping between a codec design and the and RTP lives in the RTP payload format. Here we are talking now about a generic RTP payload format, where that so is the plan to add all the mappings for the codec that someone or you or anyone interested or so is a plan to put that into your document, or is a plan to ref the traditional documents, which would be the RTP payload formats of the codecs themselves, to put there an additional section on how to do S-frame mapping, or what's the plan there? Or how would you do that?
Ideally, we will not have to reference the codecs when we specify the packetization. I mean, we assume that you have some format that is defined by the video codec, that it is what it comes in, and you don't actually need to know what are is the format or what are the contents of what it is coming to the packetizer in order to be able to packetize it.
I'm almost certain that's not going to work. And the reason is, I mean, over in S-frame, your presentation there showed very clearly that you had to follow somewhat different trains of thoughts for the three codecs you were worried about, right? For VP9, for AV1, and for H.264. And
yeah, but
you know, you had to think about all of those, right?
Yeah, but it is only because we are using the packetization defined for each of the formats. So you need to define how which part needs to be encrypted, which part does not need to be encrypted. So this is as the input is not what the packetizer expects. You have to adapt it to adapt it before you can use the packetization. But if you are defining a new packetization format, you don't really need to have those constraints.
We do need to get to move on because we're getting a little tight on time. So let's. So I think I saw Johan and Moa. Sorry, I did close the queue. So, but I mean, I think just to briefly interject for myself, I think most of these are issues that would be probably addressed in the S-frame group, not in the in this group, I suspect. But it will need to be discussed there first, I suspect. So Harold, and then let's move on.
Yeah. So the Harald Alderstrand, Google. So the thing that's happening if you don't have a specific RTP format for S-frame is that we get RTP decoders trying to peek inside the packets and failing. So I think it was Johnson's point that we have not designed the payload agnostic RTP formats before. And well, this is a case where the only thing the payload format needs to tell the RTP is, no, there is no user serviceable parts inside, stay out. And this is the question of how this interacts with SDP negotiation of codecs is very interesting. The fact that we didn't do a proper job of that for insertable streams is a bit of sadness, but we'll have to fix that. Yes, this is about how you tell the RTP packetizer and depacketizer especially. There are no user serviceable parts inside this packet.
All right, so I think the answer is anybody interested should join and participate in the S-Frame working group, and Sergio will bring something to here soon, but we do need to get a move on. So I think the next is VVC, and let's try to do this relatively expeditiously if we can.
Comment on the chair comment you made, not on the S-Frame draft. Do we have 30 seconds on that, or?
Sure, go ahead, sorry, go ahead, yeah. No, I mean, if you have a quick comment.
I do not. Yeah, I think the comment is just like, I think we need to be very careful about this. The S-Frame group is not chartered to change the way that every future RTP codec is done in this working group. That is way out of scope in it. That needs to happen over here.
Absolutely, right. Absolutely.
And I think that is really at the fundamental of, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. That may be a very good thing to do, but I think that is, I mean, that's basically what Colin said earlier, right? We're talking about changing the architecture here. So I think that it will involve this working group to sort out this problem.
But Colin, is it fair to say that S-Frame will produce some material on what exactly is being the unit? Let's say the units that are to be encrypted, like whether it's the decodable units and stuff like that.
I think it's fair to say that the S-Frame group and this working group don't come to the same solution. It's going to be a shit show. But, you know, I mean, like, we got to be coordinated, and it's the same people both places, so I'm not worried about that. But I do think this is not, I do think this is going to involve some hard discussions in this working group, not just punt it off to the other working group.
Okay.
Fine. But yeah, but that's definitely, anybody who's interested should please participate in both working groups so that we get this right. So as you said, if we come to different agreements. Yeah. All right. So Shui, or whoever's presenting. Yes.
All right, I'm just turning on my audio and the videos. Hope that everything comes through. You guys hear me? Right?
Yes, we hear you. And see you.
Okay, that's great. All right, so this is updated for the VVC RTP format. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to recap what happened from previous meetings. As you know, VVC is FDIS already. So it's under ISO approval and publication, so the specs are stable. Let's kind of recap what the design principle for the VVC payload format is kind of different from EVC and UGVC. We said we're going to support only single stream and single transport. And also we removed the package, and also we removed the download package for a clean IP environment. Then we also agreed to include the free marking as an optional feature for VVC payload format. However, this is something we probably need to reconsider based on the current discussion in the mailing list. I have a specific slide for that, so we can discuss that in the slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right, just a quick update in the 0.5 version. First, we want to welcome Yakui on board. Yakui has been providing very detailed and valuable comment, including proposed lots of great text for the draft. So we're happy to have you, and we know you're going to be a great asset for this work. We did lots of tune-up for the VVC coding section, and author also put together a list of SDP optional parameters, thanks to Yago. So all of them need to reviews. We do have a slide to reminder what are we going to move forward with those sections. And another thing I want to discuss recently is a discussion in the mailing list regarding whether or not we're going to support gradual decoding refresh and CRE in the for intro response, or whether or not we should have support in GDR in the free marking sections. So those discussions really come from the mailing list, and thanks Martin for bringing this up. We believe it's have a good amount of impact for both VBC draft and free marking draft. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right, just a quick overview what happened in section 1, mostly cut into overview. So, and what's mentioned in the section 1.13, Yakuya summarized high-level picture partitioning for VBC. Also shows the difference compared to the GVC, introduced the new sub-picture feature in VBC. So please do review them and provide a comment. Next slide, please. So here's the reviews mostly needed. As I mentioned, authors, and we started to put out a list of SDP optional parameters, focus on section, I think 7.2. It's totally 15 pages. I think a perfect fit for a good night's reading before sleep. But most of them is really copy paste from HEVC draft. With the understanding VBC, of course. Please review them. We have lots of editor notes on that. Pay attention to that. We do have a suggestion to request reviews. We do plan to push ourselves and you guys to move this forward. We'll be starting mailing list discussion for each of the proposed parameters in the draft. We anticipate 2 weeks review period for each of the topics, parameters, or group of parameters per comments received, and then new revision will be uploaded and then discussion for the next set of parameters. So to response to the mailing list, that's on our side right now. We're going to initiate the discussion in the mailing list, and hopefully end of the year we should be able to go through the whole list. But that being said, that's only one of the ways that we try to move this forward. Comments are welcome at any time. It's just much easier if you guys can just comment in the proposed review period. Next slide, please. So same goes to the SDP offer and answer section. So we'll be also starting the same process for the relevant sections. Currently, we just placeholder in the section. Also, same 2 weeks review period. We're going to initiate from the mailing list. We do hope the proposed 2 weeks review period will be okay for everyone, but do make comments if you need more time. But I think 2 weeks focusing on one of the 2 parameters should be sufficient. Next slide, please. So here's the, I would say, call it fun stuff. I expect we should spend some time on. Not sure how many people are following the current discussion in the mailing list. This is regarding the gradual decoding refresh DDR support for the VBC. So I kind of summarized the key point. It all comes down to whether or not we should support DDR in VBC, or if there's any interest in this working group to support that. Because this is not only for VBC itself, it probably has a potential impact on the AVC or HEVC. So there are 2 specific discussion points going on in the mailing list regarding the GDR. One is regarding full entry request mode, and another one is regarding if we should support GDR in free marking. Since we have supported free marking in the VBC. So the first one bring up by Martin regarding if we should allow GDR additional full entry request to response. There are some good discussion in the minutes if you want to look at it. The current discussion comes down to whether or not we should add GDR in for request response. If it's not in FR, or where should it go? My current understanding, based on the Martin proposal regarding the clean random access, should not be allowed in the full request, the full entry request mode. I'm not sure we have come to a agreement in the mailing list. So if not, so please raise your hand during the discussion phase. The second, as I mentioned, is a discussion regarding we should support GDR in the free marking. The discussion is around the confusion R bit in the short and long version of the frame marking draft. I think it's needed to be clarified whether the R bit includes both RREP or non-rep intro pictures, or it just only supposed a random access point in general. So I think we should ask ourselves $1 million question here. We know we already agreed on, I think back 2 meetings back, we support free marking, but do we really want free marking in VBC payload format? Does anybody see implementation or existing implementation or foresee large deployment in the future? I can propose a couple options here. I think the first option, if we do really want a free marking, that's assume that we foresee the deployment of free marking. So there's a couple solutions we can do, right? One is, this is regarding the GDR. So regarding so the first option is requires no modification or clarification from free marking draft, right? So what we can do in the VBC draft, we specify saying that the R bit in the VBC draft saying equal to 0 when this is a GDR picture. That's basically saying that the free marking doesn't support GDR, right? So again, you can see this is not a complete solution, right, for this whole problem, but it actually worked. I think it will work. And the second option, which also goes 2 ways. This is from most suggestions from the mailing list. The first one is adding whatever bit needed to support GDR signaling with a specific like the picture recovery count equals to 0 in mind, or do a totally generic approach to signal the general GDR and not just for VBC. And also most said this problem for that approach is we're gonna put lots of consideration for the redesign of the free marking. One last option for us, maybe the best one I think is we just don't support free marking, right? Then we only need to address if the GDR needs to support in the response mode, message mode. I believe I have one more slide. I think we can go back to this slide for some discussion once we're finished.
We have, you want a decision at the end? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's the last slide is simple, then we can go back. I need to revise the slide.
All right.
This is nothing new. So this is just as we request from our last meeting. If we should support, yeah, okay. If you should support slice indication or reference picture slice indication feedback mode. As far as we can, we know that there's not much of implementation there, but we want to hear things we don't know. So please do let us know if there's any implementation. We're going to send out the mailing list inquiry for this question as well. So please do reply. Otherwise, I think we're just going to remove that if there's no implementation. No. One last thing is we currently call it the reserved bit in the FU header. We're still trying to figure out a good usage. All right, it's called reserved. I think we probably can stress something in the mailing list, and or if somebody else knows a good suggestion, so please do share your thought in the mailing list. Hopefully I'm on time. Yeah, that's all I want to summarize. I think people probably have questions regarding the GDR.
Okay, Mo?
Yeah, I think it's beyond the GDR. I think it's all we've been talking about, for the last 20 or 30 minutes is basically high-level syntax design, and whether or not it can be optimized for each codec, or whether we need to pick something that works for all codecs. So in this case of GDR, that's a good example of things that don't currently work in any of the frame markings. Even in the new AV1 dependency descriptor, GDR signaling wouldn't work. So I think this underscores the question of whether or not we're trying to design something that basically a uniform high-level syntax for all payload formats that could be, like Justin said, hoisted up into a header instead of into the payloads. I think that's really where we are, because it's not that nobody wants frame marking. Every single person is using frame marking. The specific draft everybody does some form of frameworking, whether it's proprietary, whether it's SVC, whether it's AV1DD, whether it's the frameworking draft. Everyone is doing some sort of frameworking, for real conferencing systems. And the question is, do we really try to harmonize all of that and make it interoperable and bring it up into something common, or do we, just admit that it's too hard of a problem and let individual payload formats and individual implementations go off and signal things in the way that they want? That's really what I think it boils down to. So I think it's not just GDR. It's really all of the metadata that's needed for middle boxes to operate. The GDR is a relatively simple fix if we wanted to in frameworking. But there's a much bigger, broader question that the group needs to decide a decision on.
I think we should, start from the first question. We do kind of want some answers, right? Do we need to support GDR in the fully intro response message? That's bring up by Martin. Is there any interest in there in the working group to support that? I guess that's no.
Okay, but people are responsive to that.
Yeah, I guess that's no. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, this one there. I think that not having CRA in response to fire is okay.
Yakui, I think you're next. Thank you.
Yes, Sumo, I really want to get your opinion on what is the intention of the IBIT in your frame marking draft. So is it just for labeling an intercalated picture, or is it for labeling indicating random access points? Because currently the text in the frame marking says it's just intra picture, while the text in the payload format, VVC payload format, it's interpreted as it indicate random access point. So they are not consistent. So we need to get to know your opinion. What is the intention in the frame marking draft first?
Well, if you want to respond to that.
Yes, the intention is to be a random access point. It's just that other drafts don't use that same terminology. That there's IQ terminology, and there's the VPX and AV1 terminology, and they all differ. So maybe we should clarify in the draft, what exactly that's referring to. But yeah, it's intended to be the random access points. It's intended to be.
I see. Okay. Yes. And then you can see what the text I post in the mailing list and try to change something like that, then it will be clear. But currently the text then is not reflecting that intention. Yeah.
Yeah, I can make an update for making that text clearer.
Stefan? I'm going to close the queue after this.
I have two things, and I don't want the second to be forgotten. So on this particular discussion, we're discussing here tiny little details that are probably somewhat use case driven. My personal opinion is for GDR means that you have multiple pictures that create basically the random access point. That's something which would break a whole bunch of deployed conferencing system designs. It would be hard to implement. I want to see a real use case for that before I would support that. That's on this GDR thing. Yeah. But my other thing was, we had a little bit earlier in the slides this idea of a staged review of these 15 pages worth of HEVC sourced offer answer stuff. I would really like a resolution there. Can we move forward in this direction? Because otherwise, we'll go with a giant blob of data and text into the working group last call, and that is way too detailed to review.
Yeah, I think I agree that asking individual focused questions on the mailing list and saying this is what we propose to do, let us know if you think differently. That's probably a better approach than giving a huge blob of text for people to try to digest. So yeah, I think that staged review sounds like a good approach to me.
Okay, thank you for that. So now back to the GDR discussion. Discuss that as much as you want. It's still a high level.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we actually probably need to cut because I do want to get to video up some more topics, and we're almost out of time. So, Yukari, do you have and do you have any other issues?
Just a quick comment. I haven't reviewed the HTTP section yet, but since we have decided to support only single RTP stream thing, I guess a lot of those would not be needed. But yeah, I will make comments later.
Okay, thank you.
I cleaned up, Yukui.
Yeah.
I think. At least that was our intention.
Yep.
So there's still a lot of junk in there, but it's not that junk. It's other junk.
Okay, so we're gonna stay here. I'm gonna turn off my video audio. Stefan want to say something regarding the EVC.
Okay.
Exactly the same. We suggest to use exactly the same review mechanism for EVC, and that is that we copy paste the HEVC payload format, SDP code points minus those that don't make sense for the current EVC draft into the new working group EVC draft before publishing that, and then we beat them up one by one.
I mean, I think that hopefully the VVC beat ups will be applicable at least to some degree to the EVC beat ups. So maybe start with the VVC.
Most likely that will be the same. The key point is more that that at the moment the complete SDP section, the complete offer answer section, all that stuff in the EVC draft is empty. We want to populate that before we submit the EVC draft, and then then we'll just make changes where possible on both drafts simultaneously based on discussions.
It sounds reasonable to me. So insofar as the codecs are the same, hopefully we'll make the same decisions on both.
Thanks.
All right, so I'm going to say we should probably get to the 7983 BIS. I think I don't think there's too much to talk about on the JPEG XS. So let's.
Okay, next slide. Just a recap. This is draft is an update to RFC 7983 section 7, which documents quick multiplexing, describes the multiplexing solution, provides some guidance on handling overlap between quick and turn channels, which is not an issue in WebRTC. And then it updates potentially the DTLS content type field on the IANA page to reference a new RFC, but no other changes needed. And there is a caveat, which is that it applies to quick version 1, but not necessarily to subsequent versions. So at IETF 108, there was a request to have a call for adoption as an AVT core work item. Next slide. So the call for adoption was issued on July 30th. It ended on August 14th, but there was 9 responses were sent to the list from 6 working group participants. And so the question is, was there a conclusion reached?
So I think most people said yes, but there was a comment from Martin, which I thought was the most important because, I wanted to get his input here. Martin, if you could talk to your comment and say what you had to say and give your opinion on that.
And now I have to remember what I said because you think it was important and I can't remember it at all.
Yeah, basically, it's I think it has to do with how, whether we're going to be, whether your desire A, the quick version 1, and B, your greasing of the quick bit is going to be, how that interacts with this, because obviously this depends on not greasing the quick bit.
It very much does, but obviously in the settings where this is used, that's something that's under the control of the endpoints that are opting into this. I did have a read of the draft, and I thought it could be a little clearer about when it was talking about quick, that it was talking specifically about quick version 1 throughout.
But do you have any objections to us doing this as a general thing?
No, I think this is probably the right thing to be doing. I think there's people who will be wanting to use quick in this context, and it will work as long as you keep in mind these two things.
All right, in that case, I'd say yes.
You have to control the version. The other one, you have to avoid things like the greasing thing.
In that case, I would say that yes, the conclusion was reached and we will want to adopt this. So I was unclear what the outcome was of that conversation with you, because everybody else said yes, absolutely, with no caveats. So I just wanted to make sure you didn't think this was going to have a bad ecosystem consequences.
No.
So what is the action item to be recorded?
Well, A, say yes, we're adopting this as a working group item. But B, Martin has some comments I think that need to clarify that, the things you said in the previous slide might need to be, the caveat you need might need to be further clarified, and also perhaps citing the Martin's grease draft, depending on its status, saying don't do that if you're doing this, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was easier than I feared. All right, so we'll figure out a milestone for that, and then probably take your existing draft as the working group item, and then we can incorporate Martin's comments for subsequent drafts. Okay, so finally, now I have to figure out, my setup isn't great for the JPEG XS is a PowerPoint, which means I have to figure out how to share that because I only have Keynote.
Yes, I'm sorry, I was not aware how to upload slides to the data tracker.
That's fine. The PowerPoint is fine. It's just a limitation on my end. I have to figure out how to.
Next time I will try to do it in the proper way, like everybody else did.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I just have to find it here.
So let me already start a little bit to save some of the time, because I only have 2 slides, which is pretty short. I do realize I should have put some more emphasis on the actual RTP draft that we created for the payload of JPEG XS, but okay, it's my first IETF meeting. I need to learn a little bit. So my name is Tim Brellans. I'm actually working for a company called IntoPix, and I'm an active member for almost 15 years in ISO SE29 in the WG1 working group, more particularly, which is the JPEG committee. And I've been working on JPEG XS for some years now. And this is an already ISO officially published standard for doing image-based compression with very good properties for what we use. So many organizations are already using JPEG XS, but in particular, there's the SMPTE standards with the move that were designed for putting audio and video over IP networks, and this is backed by the AIMS Alliance. So there's a lot of track going on, a lot of changes going on in the Pro AV market to move more and more to IP-based audio-video networks. And so in this respect, there is SMPTE 2110-22 to send compressed video in a constant bitrate fashion over IP networks. And on this topic, we actually think we need an RTP payload for JPEG-XS RFC in order to be able to support the sending of JPEG-XS encoded video over RTP as part of SMPTE 22 standard. And we also are collaboratively working with VSF, the Video Services Foundation, on technical recommendation 08, where they are actually standardizing the transport of JPEG-XS video in SMPTE 2110-22. Next slide, please. And so, yeah, JPEG-XS itself, it's a cost-efficient and interoperable blah 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 image codec, but it's actually very low complexity to implement, and it is designed in particular to be very easy implementable on FPGA or ASIC, but also in software. So it allows multiple forms of parallelization. So we've been working on this RTP payload spec, and currently we are in draft version 7. But for me, it's unclear as how to proceed, or if the people here, Avtcore working group, is willing to adopt this as a.
Well, no, we've already adopted this. This is already.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay,
So the question is it done? Do you think you as far as you know, there are no remaining open issues and it's technically complete?
Well, there is one open issue which we have some customers that we're working with, and they are already implementing this kind of payload packetization, and they have an issue with something we wrote in the current draft about the interlaced if the video is encoded in interlaced mode with respect to the time codes. So this is an open comment that we will address. I was actually waiting for this meeting to do it just right after the meeting to address this in the draft. So we will issue a new version at latest next week.
All right. So yeah. So if you want, so I think if that's the only remaining open issue, and you have a so I think yes. So yes, I think the right thing to do is for you to submit a a new version of the draft with that resolved, and then we will the chairs will issue a working group last call for people to review the document, make sure they we have working group consensus that everything is good, and once we've done that, we'll see if there's any remaining comments. We can address any of those comments, and then we can submit it for publication. So that's that would be the plan at this point.
So how do I contact the chairs to tell you that we are ready and that we uploaded the
So when you upload the new draft, just you'll just send an email to the AVT mailing list saying yes, we submitted it and this is what we did. And then we can okay.
All
right.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yes, absolutely.
Super.
Okay, and with that, I think that is all the presentations. We had one more thing on the agenda, but I don't think the presenter is here, and we didn't get his slides, and we're out of time anyway. So that's worked out. I'm sorry we didn't get to that. Hopefully we can figure out where the disconnect was and have him just talk at the next meeting. So I will see you all in the next meeting and the mailing list. And if anybody has any other last comments before we close, I think we're technically in the break, but Mitako doesn't cut us off for another 7 minutes if anybody else has any last minute things to say. Otherwise, nope. All right. Okay. Well, thank you all for attending. It's a good meeting. Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.